Got it. Done. Right. Sorry for the delay. Thank you for joining, and welcome to the Hazardous Waste Discovery Show and Tell number 3. If you could go to the next slide, Alex is driving for me. We can go straight into it. I'll probably whistle stop through these early slides. Just as a reminder, we're going to break this up. We've got 45 minutes. We're going to cover in these 20 minutes what we've been up to in the last sprint, what we're planning next, and then hopefully enough time for questions at the end. But certainly if you've got any burning questions that come up during this session, just fire them away, because we don't want you to forget. And there'll also be an opportunity, if there are any questions afterwards, to get in touch with us, and there'll be an email address on the very last slide. Just to confirm here, we don't want to go into the minute detail of what we've been doing, because you may fall asleep, but we just want to give you the really high level bits and bobs that we've picked up from the last 2 weeks, which we think are really useful, tell the story of what we've been up to. The core team, unchanged, all been working really hard, core collaborators as well, we've been really closely with. Problem remains unchanged, as you would hope, that we're looking into the key pain points where our users struggle. Our goal, I've changed the picture here because it was a more exciting goal than the last one, but the goal itself hasn't changed, which is to understand the end-to-end journey for our users and identify the areas where we can make it much simpler and easier. So without further ado, we can go through what we've been doing in the last sprint. And I think the first part of this is user research. So over to you, Graham.
Thanks, Pete.
Or maybe even Sam.
I might do a little introduction. One of the things we've been doing sort of continuously is, of course, recruitment of users to take part in our user research. And I think it's fair to say this is, in parts, a difficult to engage set of users for various reasons. And we had sort of Christmas in the middle. But undaunted, we've come up with new methods all the way around, which is, I think, what Sam is going to talk about in a second. I just want to say that our main approach to recruitment is to have snowball recruitment, which is using people who have taken part in user research to recommend friends. It produces really high quality participants who know what's going to happen and are still willing to take part. And they can refer to somebody who's recommended them, so they know what it's all about. And it's a kind of tried and tested method. But it does take sometimes a little bit of time to get going. It's certainly a good investment for all the other stages that come in Agile as well. But I think I'll let Sam take you through the things we've tried so far.
Hi all. Yep. So we began user recruitment with a real targeted approach, and we focused on 4 large companies. These were companies that had waste permits, so they were known to us and we dealt with them regularly. We've run 3 user research sessions as a result of that, so that's given us a really good start. We then contacted another 60 organisations we already deal with, maybe because they have permits or they do other things to do with waste with us. They might register something or send us information. And as a result of that, I think 10 have expressed an interest, and we've already completed 2 interviews from that. So, you know, adding on to that earlier good start, we've had leads from NRW officers out in the field, and that's been fab. What's been fab about that is that it's given us a Welsh-speaking user who we're about to interview, which is really important. But at this point in discovery, you know, user research is picking up, and we've had some really good quality participants, but we're perhaps like a little bit off a shade off the quantity. And we also know we need to reach all parts of the chain, and we really want to speak to smaller users, typically the people that contact Customer Hub for support in doing things. So, you know, sole traders and small to medium businesses. So it's really important that we capture the whole kind of range of users. So, you know, we keep thinking agile and working agile and looking at where we are and where we need to be. And we look at some new approaches. And one of the things we've done is to send another mass email, this time We've sent it to 300 organisations who've registered something with us in the last 12 months, either because they're moving waste or they're producing hazardous waste. We've had one session as a result of that so far, and I think there's another one to be confirmed, so things are moving forward there. We've also added a pop-up to several waste pages on our website. There's little things that drift up in the corner of your screen if you're on a desktop or a mobile or a tablet. It asks users a few questions about their experience of using the site, and then gives them the option to leave their email address if they're happy to speak to us a bit more about their experience. We've had some engagement with it. Nobody yet has left their email address, but we're hoping that that will bear some fruit. We're also really happy to have Customer Hub colleagues support with recruiting users. What we've done there is drafted a short friendly script for colleagues to use on calls with customers who need some support, something they can use at the end of a call. And we've also come up with some sort of way of logging information that advisors can take from people who potentially want to help us and get involved in some user research. And that might be another way that we can recruit Welsh-speaking users too. And I think, as Graham said, we're just maybe starting to see that snowball effect working from all of this. But that's an overview of really how we've gone about recruiting users and how we've changed as we've moved along the sprints.
Sorry, that was a smooth one again. So that hands over to myself. So I was going to talk a little bit about some of the insights we got from some of our internal user sessions that we've been running, because obviously we've got external and internal, and both users are very valid for finding out what works and what doesn't. So we've spoken to exemptions and carriers to find out sort of what's going on there. And what I've done in this slide is really just to try and pull, I don't know, maybe one main theme rather than try and sort of summarize everything that was discussed. So exemptions and carriers, a very core theme that came out was there's no validation when people register, causes duplicates, and we don't actually know who they are. We just assume that they're relevant because they've registered. Exemptions, they don't have to pay, so they can re-register whenever. And there was a point brought up where we remove an exemption from someone, there's nothing to stop them just registering the next day, and that has actually happened a few times when we've been unhappy with someone's activities. They just re-register so that they end up back on the public register. And similar sort of problems with the carriers as well. I've done a little link to a story about a month ago from The Guardian where it was actually with the Environment Agency, but someone registered their dead goldfish. So that's why we've got a picture of a goldfish driving a truck as a carrier, and it went through. So just a sort of extra description of how there isn't really validation. We use very similar system to the Environment Agency on that one. And there is actually a link through to one of the producers we spoke to on that validation piece, because in one of our external users sessions, they used the phrase, they fulfilled their legal obligation by choosing a carrier from the public register list. So it's kind of shows the importance of it, where other people within the waste train see it very much as a definitive list. And there is obviously the responsibility for them finding out elsewhere, but it's just to emphasize the point, the importance of, validating or not. Next section we moved on to was some of our finance colleagues, and the main sort of thing coming through there was about the consignee returns. And a lot of the time, because the larger organizations don't know who the waste returns people are when they're filling them in, they say phrases like "who's raised this return" because they don't recognize the name, and then there's no purchase order number on the invoice, and things need to be manually pulled back and amended to add in purchase numbers and agree on who's paying for it. So obviously that's why Dr. Evil is obviously very cross with that. So next, the Customer Hub, they went through. We had some good feedback on this generally, is that, Customer Hub team are working really, really well, advising our customers, if anything, so well, because we get such good feedback from people that, they've helped them so much that it's almost such a good thing to do. And the customer hub very much feel like it's part of their job is to help people, navigate our web pages through the guidance to make sure they can do what they need to do. So that was quite good insight. Another one, CRM system, is probably something everyone's heard of already. There's problems with duplicate records in the system being generated. There's loads of projects ongoing currently about that to try and sort of remove the duplicates. And I think we're trying to figure out a way of, eliminating them from coming in the first place. And then another section, we've got a meeting booked for Friday to go through some more sort of detail on permitting and the permitting side of things. So it's just a real snapshot of some of the value we're getting out of speaking to the experts within NRW, on the user research side, and how we can then tie that back into findings we're getting from our customers as well. So on that nice segue, I'll move over to Lucinda, who's going to talk to you about some external feedback.
Okay, so hi. So I'll be sharing some of the findings from an external user research section we did last week. So for a bit of context about the user we spoke to works in a large waste receiving company with 19 straight sites across the mainland UK. They're a waste receiver and carrier whose customers are in waste producers. The company has a large amount of fleet vehicles. So for example, they go up to about 15 tons, vehicles like large tankers and lorries and things like that. So during the user research interview, the user did express that often when collecting waste from their customers, the people going out would advise and offer services based on what they could see there. So for example, if they saw a different type of waste that they weren't there to collect, they would let them know that they could take it away for them and start making connections that way. They generally had a very sales-driven view of waste collection in the way that they interacted with their customers. They came across as being very hands-on, sort of offering their customer support and acting as the customer's waste partner. Something else we learned from the interview is that these workers going out to collect the waste would use things they called handhelds, which are devices for keeping track of their jobs, logging when they've made collections. And they did mention that their staff received training on how to use these devices. They expressed that also there were some technical problems that they experienced when they replaced their old devices with newer ones, which I assume are just updating their kind of technology, but they were doing the same kind of task. So when discussing submitting the returns, which our user did for all 19 sites across the UK, the customer, or rather the user, spends more time preparing to submit these returns by collating data and managing corrections more than they do actually submitting or interacting with us as being an RW. They have ICT systems that their IT department has created for them that outputs data, which they then have to copy and paste into NRW's return Excel sheets. They express this can be a frustrating task as often they have trouble with formatting when pasting the data in. And in addition, each nation as well has a differently formatted spreadsheet, which causes the user to spend quite a lot of time tailoring data to fit correctly with what is needed. So it seemed that submitting the returns by the deadline set by Natural Resources Wales was the aspect that created probably the most pressure for them, leading them to say that they needed to have about 2 weeks of undisturbed time in order to complete their quarterly returns. And that's what we have here as the need of being, as a returns administrator, I need to have 2 weeks in order to complete quarterly returns deadlines. And I think at that I'll hand back to Graham.
Thanks very much, Lucinda. One of the things we've been doing with all this information from all the various sources is going on the journey of processing it and analysing it, in particular the users. We did a workshop around empathy mapping, and we've started that process in order to bring the group understanding after everybody's seen the footage and read all the notes. All of the core team have a kind of understanding of people and their needs, and it's a case of putting them together. I'm going to share, if I can, a few aspects of the workshop and talk you through that. I don't know how I get control from Alex. If that, wonderful. Just, I've got a spinning wheel of death. I apologise for that. The technology is catching up with us. go. I don't know, can this be seen?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is our empathy mapping workshop in Mural. What we asked people to do was collate and collect and share all the things they'd heard around particular roles. In this case, there were we spoke to a number of administrative sort of people who administered the returns process remotely, and we asked. One of the standard ways of sort of presenting this is listing what people feel, think, do, and say. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to, apologise. I don't seem to be able to zoom in for you. I can now. So, as you'll see, this brings up a sort of collection of issues that we've heard, that we understand about their task, that we have that help us walk in their shoes. So you'll see sometimes quite granular detail in these. We have to do a lot of emails and they're to do with this, and that's a big part of our job. Other times it's the context of the office, high staff turnover. In this case, there are some things you think and don't say. So how much has waste is illegally processed, what producers are really trying to do, the kind of beliefs perhaps that underpin sort of people's actions, how they feel. Lots of people are interested in the environment, and they tend to be optimistic about who they're working with, and everybody being in a sort of responsible chain to make sure waste goes to the right place. And that's one of the things that's a good motivation for everybody in the process. Other experiences are more negative. People feel a bit resigned to things not being straightforward, frustrated when data is a complete mess, pressured in the face of deadlines, and sort of uncertainty as well. People are unsure about things. And so that's a tiny snapshot of what is a sort of larger process, and we'd be doing it for all the different sort of user types that we've identified. One unused one to the right there. In the end, this isn't the final example, but what we hope to process are user empathy maps. Once we've really, as a group, understood the users and their priorities, is we'll build personas that will be able to live as long as the project does. In terms of a way of understanding what that person does in their role when they connect with Natural Resources Wales about haz waste, as well as the kind of wider picture. So we'll be able to list their experiences, how they approach technology, their key needs, priorities. Some of these things may change, but we'll build personas that will sort of help us trial future events and build scenarios around that. That's pretty much it for the workshop. It was useful, but it was a start, not the whole process. I wonder if now might be useful to take if there are any questions about user research, or we can sort of move on to the next section. I think that's a move on to the next section. I'm going to hand over to Thomas, who's still going to be talking about.
Yes, everyone's excited to hear my bit, clearly. That's what it is. Yes, so I'm going to quickly take us through some of the comments and feedback we've been getting on the website to give a flavour of the kind of things that are frustrating people when using the website. So I'm going to whiz through. So Alex, you can go on. So this is from, most of these are taken from Hotjar feedback. This one says, I needed to renew my license, which is due in May, but this site would not allow that and did not recognize my email. Consequently, I've had to re-register and make a new application. I was hesitant in setting up a new account, but felt compelled to. So that's something that we see quite a lot, is actually, rather than renewing, people end up re-registering and we get lots of duplicates, which causes lots of issues at our end and is obviously frustrating for the user at their end as well. Next one. So this is actually a recent one, which came about from when we introduced a new pop-up thing to try and get some more researchees, interviewees, to talk about their process and how they use the website and stuff. So this is one. It would not work, but I was unable to apply for a waste carrier license. It would have been good if it worked, which is not the feedback we want to be hearing, and it's clear that there's quite a lot of frustration in how the website works. Next one. Talk about going around in circles, an easy job made hard by an awful registration process. I'm trying to register as a company, but it keeps saying I need a business registration number. I'm a sole trader and do not have one of those. Literally going around in circles. All I want to do is register as a waste carrier. So again, clear frustration evident. Going around in circles is quite an interesting phrase and is kind of indicative of trying to find the right thing, but not being able to find it. Yeah, and obviously it flags up a thing as well where what happens if someone doesn't have a business registration number? Do we allow that, or do we require it? Do we need to make that clear so that points us in the direction of where we might want to look? The next one. Unable to renew hazardous waste license, update your website, it's far too confusing. Do you have chat help, please? So again, this is one where someone's trying to renew. And interesting that this shows that they're aware of other technological options for providing help and guidance. So they've specifically asked for chat help rather than ringing up on the phone. So that's something that perhaps you can consider as a thing. Next one. And here's a few more. Have a search function that works, doesn't even show a result when you enter details of businesses. You can actually see in the list. That's talking about the public register. There are quite a few similar ones around searching for businesses on the public register and not being able to find them. Interestingly, one reason why you might not be able to find a business on the public register is that they might not be there. But what that does show is that there's a lack of confidence in whether the search function works. And there was one piece of feedback which suggested that they've been given a waste carrier given them their name to search them up on the public register, and they're complaining that they couldn't find them. I have no idea if that's because the waste carrier wasn't actually registered, or if the search wasn't working, or there's a typo, but it's clear that the confidence in how it works isn't there. So yes, clear frustration in lots of the feedback, and also provides us places where we can look to see actually here's where the pain points are occurring. So some quite interesting stuff, and I will finish there and pass on to, I think, Adam.
Hi everyone, I'm going to take you through the continued work we've been doing on user journey mapping. So we've been taking the team through a design process of understanding the service from the user's point of view, using assumptions, guesswork in places, but also knowledge that we have within the team. So I'm going to introduce you to our first user that we've mapped. It's Giles, a farmer. So he cares about his farm. It's a family business. So for him, making sure any activities in the future doesn't damage the farm. He aims to use land to increase his income. So this is a scenario that we've chosen where he decides to create a scrap car yard on part of his land. He wants to operate in the right way, so he's conscientious. He wants to make the right decisions and abide by regulations. Has experience with permitting outside of hazardous waste and waste from being a farmer, so general experience of dealing with permits, and he has low to medium digital skills there. So maybe a Facebook user, but not necessarily an Excel whiz. Move on to the next slide. So this isn't the user journey map. This is a simplified form. So there is a more detailed one on Mural, which I'll be able to share in the future with more details. But essentially the journey that we've gone through is from discovering the user, figuring out what they want to do in their lives that leads them down this path towards interacting with the hazardous waste service. As I mentioned, decides to take scrap cars, and they go through a process of understanding what they need to do, the relationship they need to have with the NRW, eventually applying to have a standard permit, and then they are business as usual, setting up the scrapyard, setting things up, and beginning to record waste that they receive once they have customers. They then go on to report make their first return, so their hazardous waste return, and then they'll pay for that through the invoice, etc. Onto a maintaining of their relationship. So we explored all the different ways that a user has to keep NRW up to date with changes to their business, such as taking a new type of waste, which is the one that we explored within this map, or extending the yard, maybe making it bigger, maybe setting up a new premises, maybe changing their TCM, their technically competent manager. I'm getting my acronyms, I believe. And then ending that relationship with NRW as well. So in the future, we went through a scenario in which the farmer sells the business but keeps the land. So like, what does that mean? How do responsibilities change, legalities change, etc. So we did this high level along the bottom there, the sort of challenges of each stage that we've started to pick out. So early stages, this farmer hasn't decided that this is what they want to do, but they're trying to understand the realities of it, how much profit can be made, what types of waste should they take to make that profit, or more tricky to set up that business. They're looking for costs, permitting costs, what they need to pay later on down the line, and then when they register, what are they registering as? They might be confused between different roles: the carrier, producer, receiver. What type of receiver are they? And what they need in place. Do they need to be an established company? Can they be a sole trader? Can they set up with their farm and then transfer it later? Those sort of questions, into recording what are responsibilities, how do I best document the things that I need to document later on, through to figuring out the technology, mainly talking about downloading, paying for Excel here, using Excel if that's not something that they've used in the past, or getting support from someone that may be able to help them there. And then, all the way through to paying and remembering to update NRW and to renew permits and those sorts of things. If we move into the next slide, Alex. So from the work that we've done, we start to draw some pain points and opportunities that we could look into further. And I think the key ones I've highlighted here. There's a few more that we've noticed, but these are the ones that jumped out. So early on in the process, the difficulty, which I think was kind of echoed in some of the feedback there from Thomas, of understanding the guidance, working their way through the website, finding key information that they need, such as the charges further on down the line once they have that permit. Difficulty understanding what to register for and how to do that. Needing to reach out for help to get guidance, be that from the pre-app service that NRW offer, or a sort of third-party consultant, and then looking through the application and really understanding how to complete the application if they are trying to do it themselves. And then later on, we see difficulties with using Excel as a program itself, as a skill, but also particularly operating and understanding the hazardous waste return. So next is just a kind of bit of feedback from the team. So there's been a big collaborative bit of work. We've all been chipping in, even very unexperienced people like myself have been sharing out kind of understanding of the service from looking at the website, and this is from one of, looking at the website and obviously being part of NRW, and this is from Lisa, who is part of the NRW team, and she says that the workshop has prompted us with questions like what if and why are things done that way. It's pushed us out of our comfort zone and put us in the shoes of the user, so we don't assume that what we know, they also know. So yeah, that's good to hear. And it's time to change perspective on how we're looking at this service. And our next focus is on a medium-sized building firm. We're imagining that they're moving from Scotland to Wales because there's some sort of knowledge, experience there that will mean that moving to Wales, they need to learn new things. They are building on a brownfield site. They discover copper and other heavy metals that are classified as hazardous, and they will become, through this journey, a producer and carrier. So it allows us to explore that role, or those roles. Yeah, that's for me. I think I'm handing to Alex now for the next steps.
Yeah, so just quickly on our next steps is really to go through what we're going to go on to next. It seems like more of the same. So we've got more research and recruitment continues. Obviously, this being a discovery project, we want to get the most we can out of actually speaking to our users. The user journey mapping continues, as Adam has just given you a bit of insight into. And we're going to hopefully nail down a bit more of the website and customer hub analysis, getting a bit more support in that area. And then we've got our first lunch and learn session on the 27th. So that's quite a good way of people from CDPS sharing knowledge and more in depth, not project related necessarily, to NRW as a whole. And obviously it's called Lunch and Learn, but it doesn't mean you have to work through your lunch. It's just a session to help people through that stuff. So anyone's welcome. I think everyone who's on this distribution list has been sent an invite for that as well. So if you can make it, love to see you there. And then that brings us to any questions. I think we've changed the dog. I think the theory is dogs always have questions, but I'm not sure mine does.
Yeah.
So yeah, any questions?
We're trialing a new dog. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat from Garen Richards about user research. Just thought of a question on user research. Do we as the regulators count as users in any way for creating services or guidance? Our role is to make sure the operator understands all the things we need them to know to operate without risk to the environment. One for you, Graham.
Thanks, Thomas. Yes, I sort of understand that there are several things you have to be careful about in having people within an organization be part of user research. What we've tried to do is sort of identify people who aren't involved in the regulation and to use in the sort of being a regulator part of it. So we're hoping that we've identified and restrict our interactions to people as sources of knowledge on the one hand when we're talking to subject matter experts, but when we're talking to users, we realize that lots of the information that makes everything work is further processed internally in key ways that then feed back and affect external users' satisfactions. So it was almost like we feel we had to close that loop. I don't know if does that address the sort of spirit of that question.
Yeah, no, that's useful, Graham. It's just something I don't think I've ever been asked. Obviously, I fully agree with the user, research approach to things, and talked to Sam about it quite a few times. I just don't think I've ever been asked that way. I think because we feed in maybe from this end, it doesn't need to be done. But I just think it's probably worth keeping in mind that we've got a duty to make sure that people have all that information that they need to operate legally.
Yeah.
And that we don't lose that for the sake of making systems easy to use.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly our kind of sort of base of internal users isn't sort of, I don't think, anywhere near wide enough to sort of affect that part of the process. We've just cherry picked people who can give us the opposite side of what the external users have been talking about.
That's great, thanks.
On your question about which public registers the comments applied to, so the ones, I don't actually have the exact pages that they were from, but the ones that were on this were all about waste carriers, the waste carrier register.
Okay, that's good to know. There's also, I don't know whether you're also already in touch with Customer Hub, but they have a lot of queries about the system direct, so there may be even more information you can gather from them. You probably already have.
Yeah, that was the last show and tell.
Cool.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Happy to give everyone 7.5 minutes back in their day. Alex's email is on here, and when this deck goes out, if you haven't got Alex's email, you'll get it then. But please do send any questions our way, and we can get back to you directly, or bring it into our work as we go into the next sprint. But yeah, if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much for your time. Raised hand.
It's me, it's Catherine. Thank you guys. Really interesting stuff. And I'm not asking a question just to extend the time. I know that you're still undertaking a lot of user research and still trying to gather more, but do you think that there are enough sort of consistent comments and patterns coming that is allowing you to start focusing in on specific areas to tackle?
You're on mute, Graham.
Muted. My best answer as well. Sorry. From the user research point of view, yes, we've started to see patterns, and we want to test those with other users to make sure they correlate. But also, we want to make sure that how far the patterns extend in the user base. So it's lots of things some things are universal, and some things are common but not universal, and we want to have that kind of detail. But certainly, patterns are definitely emerging, and we're sort of, I would say, confident. Don't want to speak for anybody else, but of making it to useful hypotheses, certainly within the next sprint.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, we have a hypothesis creation workshop we're going to do on Thursday, so we might start to see some. Well, hopefully we'll come up with some hypotheses there. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Catherine. Any more for any more before we let you escape? No, I think that's it. But again, thank you so much for joining. Keep an eye out in your inboxes for this deck coming through. But thanks again. Have a good rest of Tuesday. And all the best.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.